right, good morning, everyone on my right and the few of you here on my left. Some of you may have gotten lost on the way here. Speaking of lost things, on my way in this morning, I'm coming down Telegraph Canyon Road and I get to the 805 and there's no way through. And there's no signage saying detour ahead, or not that I saw anyway. I don't always pay attention. But so I had to go up the 805 North, get off on 8th Street, go all the way down to 3rd Avenue, come back down. It was a nightmare. I noticed some people came straggling in like, man, the Telegraph Canyon got me. It sure did. Luckily, you know your way around. You didn't end up lost like this sheep. Do me a favor, everyone. There it is. There it is. Smile. Smile. We're going through the Gospel of Luke, and we've gone through these stories before, but Luke likes thinking about things that are lost. Right? He has the parable of the lost sheep. He has the parable of the shepherd, and he has 100 sheep, and one gets away, and the shepherd leaves the 99, and he goes and finds the one sheep and brings it back, and everyone celebrates. He has the story of the lost coin. The woman's searching frantically for this lost coin in her house, and she looks high and low, and she finally finds it, and she communicates to all of her friends and says, I found the lost coin, and everyone celebrates. We have the story of the lost son. But in this story, not everyone celebrates. Right? The son gets his inheritance, and he goes to a far-off land, and he squanders it on wild living, and he comes back because he has nothing left. And the father welcomes him in, and he throws a party, and almost everyone is there at the party except for his older brother who sits in a field and doesn't really want to go celebrate the fact that his brother's back. There's lots of lost things in the Gospel of Luke. But you may not know this, but there's actually a lost story. Now, it's not lost to us. We have it in our Bibles. You may be surprised to know, you might look at this and know which story I'm thinking of. You're like, yeah, I know this is the story of the woman caught in adultery, right? I can kind of tell that from the image. Jesus is writing on the ground. There's some people in the background. There's a woman there. And you might be wondering, why in the world, if we're studying the Gospel of Luke, am I bringing a story in from the Gospel of John? Right? This is John chapter 7, verse 33 or 53, all the way through 8, verse 11, I believe. We don't have it in our Bibles in the Gospel of Luke, but you may be surprised to know that some people do. Our earliest manuscripts that we have, if you're like, what's a manuscript? A manuscript is something that's been written by hand. Mano, hand, script, written. So when you have things written by hand, which is how all the Gospels were accounted for, our earliest copies that we have of the Gospel of John, this story that we're going to read, it's not there. Our earliest and best manuscripts, it's just not there. In fact, it doesn't get written down, this story of Jesus. And that's why I call it the lost story, because it's there, it's in the air, it's being shared orally. People are talking about it. It's being transmitted across different communities and groups and Christians, but no one ever seems to write it down anywhere, but they keep telling the story. After nearly all of the major councils of the early church, and after nearly all the creeds have been formulated, then about 300 years after Jesus, 300 years is the first time that we have a copy of this story written down. And I think that is really amazing. It's written in the Gospel of John. The earliest accounts we have, we find it in the Gospel of John. Another 400 years will pass before we find it written in the Gospel of Luke. You may not realize this, but this story is actually also found in the Gospel of Luke. And when you're reading Luke and you think of this story, the story just kind of fits right in. So it gets copied in Luke during the medieval times. This is when the Vikings, you ever watch those shows on Netflix, all the Viking shows, you ever watch those? This is that time frame. You imagine warriors crusading through Europe and Vikings taking over different lands and fighting against the church. And there's a group of monks somewhere in a monastery or scribes, and they are writing down and copying the Gospel of Luke by hand because that's how they did it. And there's this story that they know. about Jesus and this woman. And they put it right in Luke chapter 21 at the end. That's where they put the story. So, as we're going through Luke, I want us to look at this story together. But now, instead of looking at it through the eyes of John, we're going to look at it through the eyes of Luke. Because for a lot of people, that's the only place they ever knew it. Kind of a wild story, right? This lost story of Jesus, not lost to us because we've always known about it. But for 700 years, there were some people that had never heard it. And then it got written down. And they started hearing it for the first time. This is how the Gospel of Luke chapter 21 ends. It says, each day Jesus was teaching at the temple, and each evening he went out to spend the night on the hill called Mount of Olives. And all the people came early in the morning to hear him at the temple. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he appeared in the temple courts where all the people were gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. This is where it starts to flow into the story that we know from the Gospel of John. It fits right in. It's nearly seamless. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. I want you to think about, while we're reading this story, what is it about this story that people just kept telling it? You ever had a story that you just keep repeating? Some of you are married to people that don't seem to remember they've told a story already, and you've heard the story 17,000 times. Like, oh, there he goes again, telling the same story. Why are communities telling this story over and over again? They don't have it written down anywhere, but the story is so impactful and so important, they just keep talking about it. So these teachers of the law, these Pharisees, they brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery." Now, many times we'll read this story and we'll say, okay, that's fine. You caught a woman caught in adultery, but where's the man? The story doesn't tell us where the man is. Some of us will read the story, and this is one of the reasons I like this story, because it leaves itself open to imagination. So some of us will imagine that maybe one of these Pharisees or maybe one of these teachers in the law is the man that was with her. Does the text say that? No. Do we like to imagine it? We sure do. It's fun to think about. Is that how it actually played out? We don't know. Some people will say, well, they were just really harsh on women. And they just let the man go. But they grabbed her instead. Is that what the story tells us? Nope. Is it fun to imagine it? Yeah, it kind of is sometimes. You get your imagination kind of flowing. Some people say maybe she wasn't even caught in adultery at all. They just grabbed a random woman, maybe someone they just didn't like, and they drug her before Jesus and said she was caught in adultery when she wasn't at all. But is that what the story says? I like this story because we want to do more with it than the story gives us. What we know is they bring a woman to Jesus and they say, she was caught in the act of adultery. In the law of Moses, they continue, in the law of Moses, we're commanded to stone such women. Now that's technically true, sort of. Not just such women, but also such men. They're both supposed to be stoned. Now, you should be grateful you live in a society where if you are caught in an act of adultery, the townspeople don't drag you outside the city and stone you to death. This also indicates that they were witnesses, because the people who do the stoning in the law of Moses, they're the ones who saw it. And one might ask, well, how did they see it? I don't know. Let your imagination run wild, but stick with what we know. They saw it. They grab her, and not the guy, for some reason, drag her before Jesus and say, what are we supposed to do? The law of Moses says to stone her. They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. Why a trap? Why is this a trap? Well, because if he says, let's stone her, there's Roman laws that prohibit Jewish people from killing one another. If he says, don't stone her, then they can say, you have no regard for the law of Moses and what it commands us to do. So no matter what he picks, he's wrong. It's a trap. Reminds me of that Star Wars meme. It's a trap. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And I know what you're all asking, and I'm going to provide a very solid, certain, definitive answer. What did Jesus write on the ground? And the answer is nobody knows. It's definitive and it's certain. Nobody knows what he wrote. He just bends down the ground. He starts writing on the ground. You would think that maybe he's writing something that's going to help to change their mind. But as he's writing, it says they are still questioning him. But then he stands up and says, I have an idea. If you're without sin, that stone you have in your hand, throw it. Throw it at her. I find this an interesting approach because the law of Moses did not say if you were a witness to the adultery and you also happen to be sinless, throw the stone. But that's what Jesus says. It says, and again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time. The older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. He doesn't say that she's innocent. He says she's forgiven. Here's one of the things of the story that we get so caught up in all of our interesting questions sometimes, but I have another interesting question. Have you ever been so attached to a belief or an idea or to this thing that you think needs to be done that you were willing to kill someone for it? I would dare say the answer is no. That you've never been that convinced where there's a person right in front of you and you've gone and you've found the perfect throwing stone so that you can hurl it at that person, hit them in the head, and they die. I don't think you've ever been there. Maybe you have, but probably most of us have never been to that point. I want you to imagine what it's like to have that kind of conviction. And then ask yourself, what would Jesus have to write or say to make you change your mind? Have you ever changed your mind? What would Jesus have to write? What words would he say to Rob Coyle to have Rob Coyle say, I'm letting go of that idea. It's wrong. Because you have to understand, they changed their mind. They said, we have this law of Moses before us, and it tells us to do this thing, and Jesus with just some words or something on the ground and a short phrase stated, and they all stop, and they go away. This is not. So sometimes we look at these teachers of the law and these Pharisees and we think, maybe rightly, that they're a certain type of person. But I will tell you, they changed their mind. And they walked away. And sometimes we are so convinced of ourselves that changing our mind is the last thing we will ever do. They had a Bible verse that backed them up. So why did they stop? Maybe they were a little more humble than we like to give them credit for sometimes. You see, when they were confronted with their own humanity, when they were confronted with their own sin, when they're confronted with the things that they had done wrong and the ways that they had let God down and the way that they had let other people down in their lives, they realized, who am I to throw this stone? And it is time for a church of people to say, who are we to keep throwing stones at people? And yet we do. Keep throwing the stones. It's interesting because by Jesus' own qualifications, there's really only one person present in this story who was qualified to pick up a stone and throw it, and that's Jesus himself. So when he says, where are they? Has no one condemned you? And she says, no one, sir. And he says, neither do I. I'm the only person who could pick up one of the stones that they dropped on the ground and pick it up and throw it at you. But I won't do it. As believers, we need to be humble. Humble enough to change our minds. Humble enough to drop our stones. Because sometimes we cast aspersions and we look down on people, and the truth of the matter is we're not any better. Who am I? Who is Rob Coyle to go out and condemn people? I'm nobody. Who am I to go out and see someone who's living a life of sin, and instead of trying to help them out of it, I just desire to condemn them in it? When you think about the Gospel of John, the area where this story really first found itself, it says that Jesus came to seek and to save that which is lost. He didn't enter the world to condemn it, but he entered the world so that through him the world might be saved. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall be saved. Jesus didn't come to condemn. He came to rescue and restore. He came to celebrate Jubilee. And in the spiritual world, we're all impoverished and we're all in need of someone to come and set us free. Drop your stones and genuinely love the people around you. Genuinely love them and care for them and care about them. And if you think they're wrong, then love them. There's a reason this story continued to be passed around before it was ever written down. For 300 years and then another 400 years. There were some communities that went 700 years only having heard the story, never seeing it written down anywhere. I'm thankful that it got written down. I don't know if it could have survived another 1,000 years without being written down somewhere for us to read it. Because when I read the story, sometimes I see myself as the woman and sometimes I see myself as the Pharisees. But I want to see myself as Jesus. Let's love the people around us. There is no Youth 1050 today, so my apologies. Both John and Brandon are out of town, so you guys get to stick around for the rest. But I just want to encourage you, as I encourage myself. Don't judge the people around you. Just love them. Just love them and restore them. Amen? Art?